So thanks everyone for coming today. My name is Jim Wallace. I'm a PhD student in systems design engineering, and I co-taught this term course on user-centered design with Jonathan Histon, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. But I will be talking about some of our joint experience teaching on Learn about user-centered design. So just to give you a bit of a background on the course and what we were teaching and some of the challenges that we face as instructors, the course is on engineering psychology, human factors, and design. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what any of those terms mean, we look at psychological factors, basically how you can design interactive computer systems. So the psychology of those systems, how do you engineer systems to make sure that they're usable, that people aren't going to make too many errors when they're interacting with them, especially for important systems. You can imagine maybe vehicles or emergency support software, basically anywhere where you don't want people screwing up, where lives might be at stake. Anywhere from there all the way down to the consumer end. So Professor Histon in particular is very interested in looking at flight systems, air traffic control, cockpits, and the types of mistakes that people make when they're flying airplanes. I, on the other hand, come from more of the consumer, so I'm really interested in how you make consumer products that are really easy to use, how people are going to kind of get the most enjoyment out of using those products. Some of the challenges we face when we're teaching this course are large class sizes. Large class sizes for us might not mean the same thing that it does for you. For us, that's about 60 people. Yeah. I have a background in computer science. I know that we have much bigger class sizes than some of the other faculties. But for systems, that's actually quite large. And once we get into talking about a little bit more about how we teach the course, you'll see why that can actually be a bit of a big number. One of the things we really strive for when we're teaching is student engagement. So it's a very hands-on course, a very project-oriented course. And so we try and get students to really engage with the material as much as possible. And it's really important for this type of material because it's very example-based, very much trying to pick up from what other designers have done and what other mistakes have been made and learning from that kind of first-hand experience. And that kind of ties in here with connecting the classroom theory to the muddy real world. So again, we teach a lot of theory. There's a lot of textbooks reading. But quite often, understanding how that theory translates into practice can be quite challenging. So we try and get students engaged and looking at real projects from the real world and understanding how theory guided that design. So again, just to give you a little bit more background on the course, it's a third-year engineering technical elective. So it actually tends to be very popular with engineering students because it's not actually all that technical. It's much more of an artsy course. We're more interested in the psychology and other aspects of interaction rather than teaching calculus or explicitly focusing on design. We tend to get a pretty good range of third and fourth year students, and they're not all systems design engineering students. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about teaching the course. So we actually get people from a really broad array of backgrounds, from kinesiology, from computer science, as well as some of the other types of engineering. So mechatronics engineers typically enjoy taking the course as well. And again, we focus on methods for usability and design. So it's not so much about actually designing interactive computer systems as it is taking a design and understanding whether or not it's doing what you want it to do. So how do you do the user testing? How do you understand what your requirements are in the first place so that when you go and design that system, you're doing it to do the right sets of things? So in that regard, it's very much a non-traditional engineering course. It's not hard calculus. It's more focused on the user and understanding people and how they're going to be using technology. And this is probably one of the first slides you'd see if you were to sit down in the course, but just to give you an idea of what user-centered design really means. It's a philosophy that puts the user at the center of the design process. So it's thinking about the user and then how they might interact with the task and how you might design for a specific environment. So it's understanding that somebody sitting at a desk in an office probably has a very different set of requirements than somebody out in the field. One of the really common examples we use is if you're maybe surveying for oil in northern Alberta, you might be wearing gloves because it might be really cold. And so interacting with devices with gloves on might be very different than somebody in the office. And so it's understanding how you might design that interface differently for two people doing the same type of work but in very different environments. Okay, so when we start teaching the course, we obviously have a few goals. As I was talking about, we really try and get people engaged with the material. And so we want to enable students to relate to the core design concepts. And it can seem very distant, especially if you're not really engaged with the design process. Depending on your background as an engineer, you may or may not ever even think about end users. And so to get people engaged with that kind of thinking, we have a few different techniques we use. The first is a big one. The courses, I think it's 60% of the grade is based on one big team project. So we have people come in. This term, the project was to design a mobile application for somebody in the community. So we had people designing applications for the LCBO, for the UW Plaza next door. We had people doing grocery store apps. And the idea was to have them come in, talk to users, talk to people who are responsible for running the business, try and get an understanding of the different types of needs that those two different groups would have, and understand that they're both going to be interacting with the app in some way, and then to have them actually go through several iterations of designing that application. And as they go through that design process, they get feedback from all of the different groups. So that's the course project. That takes up the vast bulk of the time of the course. But we also try and do a lot of engaging in-class exercises. So bring in examples, do a lot of breakout groups, that kind of thing. And then we also kind of incorporated with the hands-on term project, have some skill development assignments. So we have people do video prototyping. Some of them actually get into developing code, and essentially engaging in the design process. So all of that is actually what I'm not really going to be talking about today. The part that I would like to focus on is the supplemental readings. So one of the things we tried to do, in addition to all of that coursework, was to tie in some material from the World Wide Web. And in particular, I'm going to be talking about Twitter. So, okay, so engaging through supplemental readings. Again, design process is really grounded in understanding your users, understanding a lot of the different practical cases of design in the real world. And so what we wanted to do was try and give students a chance to run across different examples from papers, different media articles, blog postings, and get a chance just to read about those experiences as people report them in reality, and just to think about how that might reflect on the class material. So, are there good and bad practices? Are there policy discussions that are relevant to what they're learning in the class? And we wanted to just have a way of engaging students and reinforcing that connection with the material. Okay, so kind of previous practice was just getting students to do some of the web surfing, log into the learning system, create some kind of discussion forum or article posting. So typically what we would do the first week of class, we would ask students what they thought good and bad design was, and have them log into the forums and talk about, is this good design, is this bad design, explain why it is, and just try and spark up some kind of conversation that way. The challenge here is that the overhead reduces the likelihood of sharing. So you're navigating through the system. It's a bit of a portal. You've got to put in your password, navigate to the discussion forum. And you're really starting to disconnect yourself from that moment when you've engaged with the material to working into the process of actually sharing it. And so one of the other challenges there is it's really hard to have mobile access as well. So getting into that development system, getting into Learn and sharing links really quickly can sometimes be challenging. And one of the things that we looked at right early on at the beginning of term was how we could maybe integrate some of the technologies that are out there and build them into the Learn environment. And I guess our attitude at the beginning of the term was that Learn was totally new. We hadn't tried anything before, so we're just going to try everything out that we can and see what works. And so one of the things that kind of popped out right at the beginning was that a lot of websites have integrated Twitter logins or integrated Twitter functionality. And it seems like a really nice and easy way to let students share things as they find them and do so in a very effortless and easy way. So it provides kind of a one-stop login and the publishing of material. It's, people have their dedicated Twitter accounts. They can always be logged into those. And it's also easy to follow material as well. So you can create a hashtag. For those who aren't familiar with Twitter, you basically just put a hash symbol plus any word. And that's just a really easy way to follow different material as it appears on Twitter. And the other big win for us was that we could integrate it on the course homepage for students who aren't familiar with Twitter. So it was very easy for us to, through Learn, insert a widget into the main course that people wouldn't actually have to sign up or have any kind of special access to view. So I should be able to show you an example. And unfortunately, I was accessing this morning, and Twitter was not behaving very well. So I will show you an example of the actual material in the next slide. But for those of you, just to give you kind of an idea of what it looked like on our course website, you have your typical news. We have a calendar widget. And over on the side here was a Twitter widget. So this popped up whenever people logged into the course website. And I'll show you again in a minute. But they would get a nice little list of tweets with the hashtag. So we created a hashtag called UWSide348. Anything that was relevant to the course would pop up there. Students could tag anything that they wanted to, and with that hashtag, and they'd be contributing to the course. So all this Twitter widget does is it looks for posts with that tag. And I just went to my Twitter feed. Almost everything I posted had that hashtag. But essentially, you're going to get this list of items. So the stuff that I was posting to Twitter over the course of the term was just any time that I ran into something on the web that I thought was relevant or interesting or that students might want to read, I would do it. So there was a usability study on using Mac OS X for the first time. Just put that tag on there, and it was ready to go. Sometimes you have to design for the users you've got, not the ones you wish you had. Little blog posts, news articles, anything that seemed relevant. OK, so that was up, I think, within the first week or two of class. And what we did was we posted material as frequently as we could. Whenever I ran across something interesting, I'd put it up. Professor Hisson did the same. And here's what we learned. So first of all, it significantly improved the accessibility of articles. Going into that discussion forum was a bit too much of an overhead to ask students to commit to on a regular basis, whereas putting it up right on the front web page actually made things quite easy. And we definitely saw more engagement that way. It was relatively easy to set up from the instructor's perspective. There's a pretty standard Twitter widget that we were able to include and just paste in there just like any other widget on Learn. Some students actively engaged and were following and engaging with articles. So it wasn't just us posting articles to there. For those, again, who aren't too familiar with Twitter, you can retweet messages or respond to messages. And we had some students doing that as well. So it wasn't just one way. People were really interested in having a bit of a discussion through Twitter that way. But there were a couple challenges here. So the first is that there's less opportunity to explain and share thoughts on the importance or significance of an article. And again, Twitter's limited to 140 characters. So you really don't have a lot of room to express why you're posting something or why it's interesting. So I think it really worked effectively as a teaser to try and pull students in. But when you're actually trying to teach why you're posting that or a lesson, you really have to be able to follow up with it in class. It's not something you can just put out there and forget. And anecdotally, some students reported looking past it on the page. So you can put it up there, but not everybody's going to read it. I think in my experience, the students who are already pretty engaged in the course were really interested in looking at the Twitter feed. but the ones who maybe weren't really involved with the course may have just looked past it. Okay, so again, other applications of Learn. Just what else we looked at with Learn. Provided students with a team discussion boards. When we have people work on that team project, it's worth a really big component of their course. We try and give them as much access on Learn as possible. So we set up discussion boards, team Dropboxes, everything they need to collaborate together on that project under one umbrella. We found that most people maybe just used Dropbox instead and conducted everything outside of Learn. And we found that students reported an appreciation of the use of the calendar functionalities. So again, when I was showing you that course website, there's the calendar widget in the top left. Students really liked that. That was nice feedback. And the other big one is that we set up quizzes on a weekly basis to test weekly reading material. And we find that that's a very effective way to keep people up to date. So they actually have to read the material for that week before we get to it in lecture.